A bitter December wind swept through Boston's Oakwood Cemetery, rattling the bare branches of ancient oaks as Nathaniel Harrington made his annual pilgrimage to the grave of his ex-wife. At 58, the billionaire CEO of Harrington Enterprise cut an imposing figure even in grief, his silver-streaked dark hair perfectly styled, his cashmere coat a shield against both the cold and his complicated emotions. 20 years had passed since Catherine's death, yet the weight of their bitter divorce and his final, cruel words to her still haunted him with unrelenting persistence. Now let's dive into today's story. Nathaniel placed a bouquet of white lilies, Catherine's favorites, against the granite headstone. Their marriage had ended catastrophically, with accusations that had destroyed any chance of reconciliation. What he didn't know was that this annual ritual of guilt would become the moment his entire life would shatter. As the morning fog began to lift, Nathaniel noticed a figure moving through the mist, a young man, perhaps 19 or 20, tall and lanky with features that prompted an uncomfortable sensation of déjà vu. The youth stopped short upon seeing Nathaniel, his expression transitioning rapidly from surprise to what appeared to be carefully contained anger. "You're him, aren't you?" Nathaniel Harrington. The young man's voice carried the slight tremor of suppressed emotion. "Yes." "Do we know each other?" The young man's laugh held no humor. "No, we don't. That's rather the point." He gestured toward Catherine's grave. "But I know her. I've been visiting my mother's grave every week since I was old enough to come here alone. Dad, she hid me from you for 20 years. How could a man worth billions not know he had a son? What could drive a woman to hide her child from his father for 2 decades? And what happens when 20 years of carefully guarded secrets come crashing down at a graveside? If you've ever wondered what happens when a billionaire's perfect life falls apart, hit that like button and subscribe to Extraordinary Stories HQ right now for more shocking stories every week. 22 years earlier, Nathaniel and Catherine Harrington had been Boston's golden couple. He was the ambitious heir to Harrington Enterprises, who had tripled the company's worth through shrewd investments and technological innovation. She was the brilliant architect whose designs graced skylines across the country. Their marriage, initially dismissed by Boston's elite as the impulsive union of 2 headstrong personalities, had proven remarkably solid for 5 years. They lived in a stunning Beacon Hill mansion, attended the most exclusive galas, and were featured regularly in business magazines as the power couple who had it all. Nathaniel's drive paired perfectly with Catherine's creative vision. When they walked into a room, heads turned not just because of their wealth or appearances, but because of the electric connection that seemed to bind them together. But everything changed on that fateful evening in their mansion study. Catherine entered with tears of joy in her emerald eyes, almost bouncing with excitement. "Nate, I have incredible news," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed lasted only seconds but stretched like hours between them. Nathaniel set down his tumbler of bourbon, his expression transforming from shock to suspicion to cold fury. "Pregnant?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you expect me to believe this child is mine?" Catherine stood by the fireplace, her hands instinctively protective over her still flat stomach. "Nathaniel, please. You know I've never been with anyone else. This is our miracle." His bitter laugh cut through the room's tension. "Miracle? I've been to every fertility specialist in the country. The diagnosis was clear: I cannot father children. So tell me, Catherine, whose miracle are you carrying?" Dr. Marilyn Foster, the country's foremost fertility specialist, had delivered the diagnosis 2 years earlier. Comprehensive tests had determined that Nathaniel's childhood bout with mumps had left him sterile, a reality he had painfully accepted. While he and Catherine had discussed adoption, they had ultimately prioritized their careers. "I've loved you faithfully for 5 years," Catherine whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I would never betray you." "There must be a mistake with the diagnosis." The mistake, Nathaniel responded coldly, was me believing you were different from all the rest, that you married me for something other than my name and fortune. The argument escalated through the night, his accusations growing more vicious as Catherine's denials became more desperate. By midnight he had ordered her to leave their home, instructing his lawyers to prepare divorce proceedings and financial settlements contingent on her signing non-disclosure agreements. Keep the child, he told her coldly. Keep whatever story you've concocted, but you'll do it far away from me and without the Harrington name. Within 24 hours, Catherine had vanished from their shared life, taking only personal possessions and leaving behind everything they had built together. Have you ever had your entire world collapse because someone refused to believe in you? That moment when trust shatters can change everything. Comment below if you've ever experienced a betrayal that altered your life path. Catherine Winters, reverting to her maiden name, left Boston behind and settled in a modest apartment in Burlington, Vermont. Using her professional reputation as leverage, she secured architectural consulting work that allowed her to work remotely while preparing for single motherhood. The pregnancy progressed normally, despite the emotional trauma of the divorce. Through a single mother's support group, Catherine met Meredith Thompson, a pediatric nurse who became her closest friend and eventually Alexander's godmother. "He looks exactly like his father," Catherine whispered when Alexander was born, a healthy 8-pound boy with Nathaniel's distinctive chin and brow. Most telling was the strawberry-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder, identical to the Harrington birthmark Nathaniel himself possessed, as had his father and grandfather before him. The birth certificate listed Nathaniel Harrington as the father, though Catherine harbored no illusions that her ex-husband would ever acknowledge their son. Those first years tested Catherine's resilience. She worked from home while caring for Alexander, taking on increasingly prestigious architectural projects while carefully avoiding publicity that might bring her to Nathaniel's attention. When questioned about her son's father, she crafted a simple narrative. He had died before Alexander was born, a story that satisfied her son's curiosity through early childhood. As Alexander grew, the resemblance to Nathaniel became more pronounced. By age 10, Catherine had established her own architectural firm, providing a comfortable if modest life for them both. Alexander proved exceptionally bright, with his father's head for numbers and his mother's creative vision. Catherine saved diligently for his college education, determined that her son would have every opportunity, despite growing up without a father. The truth began to emerge in fragments as Alexander entered adolescence. When he was 14, Alexander discovered old newspaper clippings about Catherine and Nathaniel's marriage in a box hidden in their attic, society pages announcing their wedding, professional profiles mentioning their partnership. "He's alive, isn't he?" Alexander demanded, confronting his mother with the yellowed clippings. "My father isn't dead." Catherine revealed a partial truth. Yes, his father was alive, a wealthy businessman who had divorced her before Alexander was born. She explained the medical diagnosis and the accusations of infidelity. What she didn't reveal was how thoroughly Nathaniel had rejected them both. Catherine was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when Alexander was 17. As her condition deteriorated, she finally shared the complete, unvarnished truth about his origins. "I never stopped loving him," she admitted during her final weeks. "But I couldn't let him hurt you the way he hurt me. Maybe someday, when you're ready, you'll let him know who you are. But do it for yourself, Alex, not for me, and not for him." Catherine died when Alexander was 18, leaving him her architectural firm, their modest savings, and a letter to be opened on his 20th birthday. A letter explaining everything she had kept from Nathaniel for nearly 2 decades. This story shows the incredible strength of a mother's love. If you believe Catherine did the right thing protecting her son, give this video a thumbs up. If you think she should have fought harder to make Nathaniel believe her, leave your thoughts in the comments below. While Catherine built a life centered around her son, Nathaniel Harrington transformed Harrington Enterprises, from a successful regional business into a global technology and real estate empire. The pain and betrayal of Catherine's perceived infidelity became the fuel for his relentless ambition. 16-hour workdays left little time for reflection, and his few personal relationships remained carefully superficial. By age 58, Nathaniel had achieved everything he had ever professionally envisioned: a personal fortune exceeding $10 billion, a conglomerate spanning 5 continents, and a reputation as one of the most formidable minds in American business. Nathaniel remarried twice, brief, high-profile unions with women who complemented his public image without penetrating his emotional barriers. Both marriages ended amicably but distantly, reinforcing his private belief that meaningful connection was beyond his reach. What few people recognized was the profound emptiness at the core of his existence. His sister Olivia, the only person who spoke to him with complete candor, confronted him during a rare private dinner at his penthouse apartment. "You've built an empire, Nate," she told him, using the childhood nickname he tolerated only from her. "But what's it all for? You have no children to inherit it, no real friends to share it with, and your idea of celebration is drinking 18-year-old scotch alone while reviewing quarterly projections." Nathaniel had dismissed her concerns with practiced ease. Not everyone needs the white picket fence and 2.5 children to be fulfilled. Live. Some of us find satisfaction in achievement, but in private moments, increasingly frequent as he approached 60, Nathaniel found himself revisiting the past, particularly his marriage to Catherine. The explosive end to their relationship had been the defining rupture of his personal life. Annually visiting her grave had become a ritual of penance he couldn't explain even to himself. He had learned of Catherine's death through an architectural journal's obituary, a brief, respectful acknowledgement of her contributions to sustainable urban design. The notice mentioned no survivors, no family. Nathaniel had attended the funeral unobtrusively, standing at the back of the small Vermont chapel filled with Catherine's colleagues and friends, none of whom recognized the man who had once been her husband. What he hadn't seen, couldn't have known, was the dark-haired young man sitting in the front row, Catherine's son, his shoulders bearing the weight of grief and a history he was only beginning to fully comprehend. But what happens when the walls of a billionaire's empty kingdom come crashing down in a single moment? When the past he thought he'd buried forever suddenly stands before him in living flesh and blood? Standing in Oakwood Cemetery 20 years after their divorce, facing a young man who claimed to be the physical embodiment of what Nathaniel had believed impossible, the billionaire found himself utterly unprepared. The rational, calculating mind that had orchestrated billion-dollar mergers failed him completely. "This is impossible," Nathaniel managed, his voice barely audible over the winter wind. "Catherine Winters was my mother," the young man stated firmly, his gaze unwavering. "And according to her, and my birth certificate, you're my father. She hid me from you for 20 years, just as you demanded she disappear from your life when you accused her of infidelity." Nathaniel felt the blood drain from his face as he stared at features that were suddenly undeniably familiar: Catherine's eyes, his own jawline, the Harrington brow that had marked generations of his family. "That's impossible," he whispered, though even as he spoke the denial, doubt crept in. I couldn't." "My name is Alexander Winters," the young man continued relentlessly. "I turn 20 next month. Mom told me everything before she died. About how you were told you were sterile. About how you called her a liar and a cheat when she got pregnant. About how you threw her out without a penny rather than believe her." Alexander reached into his jacket, producing a sealed envelope. "Mom left me this to give to you if we ever met. She wrote it before she died." He held it out, his hand steady, while Nathaniel's trembled slightly as he accepted it. The envelope contained 2 items: a letter in Catherine's distinctive handwriting and a faded photograph of an infant Alexander, a birthmark clearly visible on his left shoulder, identical to the distinctive mark Nathaniel himself possessed. The letter was dated 3 weeks before Catherine's death, revealing how she had protected their son from rejection while preserving the truth for when he was old enough to decide what to do with it. Even if what you say is true, Nathaniel said finally, a DNA test would be required to establish paternity conclusively. Alexander shrugged with forced casualness that couldn't quite mask his tension. I'm ready whenever you are. I've had 20 years to prepare for this moment. You've had about 20 minutes. Take whatever time you need to process. He turned to leave, but Nathaniel's voice stopped him. Wait, where can I reach you? I'll be back next Sunday, Alexander replied without turning around. Same time. She always liked the morning light on her headstone. Imagine discovering someone you thought never existed has been out there all along. How would you react if your past suddenly appeared in front of you? Would you embrace it or run from it? Share your thoughts in the comments. The week that followed was among the most disruptive of Nathaniel's meticulously ordered life. He cancelled board meetings, postponed acquisition negotiations, and retreated to his Beacon Hill mansion with strict instructions that he was not to be disturbed except for absolute emergencies. First, he located Dr. Marilyn Foster, now retired from her fertility practice, but still serving as a consultant at Massachusetts General Hospital. Their meeting in her oak-paneled office was tense, clinical, and revelatory. Is it possible you were wrong? Nathaniel demanded without preamble. Could I have fathered a child despite your diagnosis? Dr. Foster removed her glasses, regarding him thoughtfully. Medicine isn't infallible, Mr. Harrington. While the tests were comprehensive, there are documented cases of men with similar diagnoses fathering children. It's rare but not impossible. You told me it was impossible, Nathaniel countered, his voice dangerously quiet. I told you it was extremely unlikely, she corrected gently. Perhaps in your need for certainty, you heard an absolute where medicine could only offer probabilities. Next, Nathaniel hired Derek Montrose, a private investigator renowned for his discretion. Within 3 days, Montrose delivered a comprehensive dossier. Alexander Winters, born in Burlington, Vermont, to Catherine Winters, excelled academically at Burlington High School, currently studying architectural engineering at the University of Vermont. Recently inherited his mother's firm. Clean record, no debts, no previous attempts to contact Nathaniel. Most significantly, Montrose had obtained photographs documenting Alexander's development from infancy through adolescence, images that showed with uncomfortable clarity the emerging Harrington features alongside Catherine's distinctive eyes. By Friday, Nathaniel had arranged for an expedited, private DNA test. 3 hours after samples were collected, the facility director delivered the verdict personally, a 99.998% probability of paternity. Alexander Winters was, beyond reasonable scientific doubt, Nathaniel Harrington's biological son. The drive from the testing facility to Nathaniel's mansion proceeded in tense silence. Only when they were seated in his study, ironically the same room where he had rejected Catherine's pregnancy announcement 2 decades earlier, did Nathaniel finally speak. I owe you an explanation, he began, then corrected himself. No, I owe you an apology. I was wrong, catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. Alexander's response was measured. I didn't come looking for apologies. I came looking for truth. The truth, Nathaniel acknowledged heavily, is that I allowed pride and misplaced certainty to destroy what should have been the most important relationship in my life. I refused to consider that the medical diagnosis might be wrong, because it was easier to believe your mother had betrayed me than to hope for something I'd been told was impossible. She never betrayed you, Alexander stated firmly. She loved you until the day she died. This moment of truth changes everything for both men. If you've ever discovered something that completely changed how you see your past, share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. The weeks following the DNA confirmation were awkward, tentative, and occasionally combative as father and son began the complex process of establishing a relationship neither had anticipated. Alexander returned to his studies at the University of Vermont, while Nathaniel made the unprecedented move of reducing his work schedule to make regular trips to Burlington. Their initial conversations were stilted, focused primarily on Catherine, the only person they had both loved, albeit in profoundly different ways. Gradually, mutual interests emerged. Architecture. Alexander had inherited his mother's spatial genius, mathematics, where Nathaniel recognized his own analytical patterns, and surprisingly, classical music, a passion Catherine had nurtured in her son from infancy. The revelation of Alexander's existence created waves through Nathaniel's carefully ordered world. His sister Olivia, upon meeting her nephew, wept openly at the family resemblance. "He has Dad's expressions," she told Nathaniel privately. "And your stubborn chin. How could you not have seen it immediately?" The business world buzzed with speculation when Nathaniel Harrington began making regular trips to Vermont without explanation. Rumors of illness, a secret love affair, or an unannounced retirement circulated through financial circles. 4 months after their cemetery encounter, during a weekend visit to Boston, Alexander broached the subject they had both carefully avoided. "I want to know why," he said directly as they walked through the public garden. "Not why you didn't believe her. I understand the medical diagnosis. What I can't understand is why you didn't even consider the possibility. Why you didn't demand tests then, instead of 20 years later." Nathaniel was silent for several moments, formulating the answer he had been avoiding even in his private thoughts. "Fear," he finally admitted. "Not of fatherhood itself, but of allowing myself to hope for something I'd been told was impossible, only to have that hope destroyed. It was easier to reject the possibility entirely than to embrace it and risk disappointment." "So you rejected her instead?" Alexander observed without inflection. "Yes, and in doing so I rejected you. There's no justification that wouldn't sound like an excuse." The conversation marked a turning point. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel shocked the business world with a simple press release. Harrington Enterprises CEO announces recognition of son, Alexander Winters, 20, following confirmation of paternity. Mr. Harrington acknowledges that a medical misdiagnosis led to his separation from Alexander's late mother, Catherine Winters, and expresses profound regret for the 20-year estrangement from his only child. Alexander maintained his boundaries through it all, declining Nathaniel's offer to join Harrington Enterprises, choosing instead to complete his degree and continue his mother's architectural practice. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship that seemed beyond repair? It takes tremendous courage to face the past and create something new from broken pieces. Drop a love emoji if you believe in second chances. A year after their cemetery encounter, father and son stood together at Catherine's grave on the anniversary of her death. Alexander placed white lilies beside Nathaniel's traditional bouquet. The December morning was cold but clear, nothing like the misty day that had changed both their lives forever. "She would be pleased we found each other," Alexander said quietly. "Not vindicated. She was never interested in proving you wrong. Just pleased that the truth finally emerged." "She deserved to see it," Nathaniel replied, regret evident in his voice. "To know I finally understood." "She knew you would," eventually Alexander assured him. "That's why she left the letter. She believed that beneath all your certainties and defenses, you were a man capable of recognizing truth when confronted with it. That's the man she married. That's the man she wanted me to know." As they walked together through the cemetery, Alexander paused, reaching into his coat pocket. "There's something else you should know. Something I wasn't ready to share until now." He handed Nathaniel a faded hospital wristband. "Mum scheduled a DNA test right after I was born. She knew someday I might need proof." Nathaniel examined the plastic band with its yellowed label, Harrington, Alexander N. Evidence that, even in her deepest pain, Catherine had acknowledged his paternity and preserved his connection to their son. "She filed my birth certificate with your name," Alexander continued. "Then she built a life where no one would think to connect us. She wasn't hiding me from you out of revenge. She was protecting me from rejection while preserving the truth for when I was old enough to decide what to do with it. The revelation of Catherine's foresight, her determination to shield their son while never erasing Nathaniel's existence, struck the billionaire with force. The empire he had built paled in comparison to the legacy Catherine had preserved, a son who carried not just the Harrington birthmark on his shoulder, but the best qualities of both his parents. "She was always the wisest of us," Nathaniel acknowledged, his voice rough with emotion rarely displayed. "I built buildings and fortunes. She built you." Over the past year, Nathaniel had begun to understand what his sister Olivia meant about the emptiness of his achievement. His billions meant nothing compared to the connection he was slowly building with his son. Not because Alexander was his heir. The young man had made it clear he had his own path, but because he represented something money could never buy: a second chance. For Alexander, the journey from Catherine's protective silence to Nathaniel's belated acknowledgement represented not an ending but a beginning, the start of a relationship that would never replace what he had lost, but might, in time, create something valuable from the fragments of a family broken by mistake and mended, imperfectly but genuinely by truth. As the sun climbed higher, father and son continued their conversation, 2 decades delayed but finally, imperfectly begun. This story reminds us that it's never too late for truth to heal what's broken. If this touched your heart, make sure you're subscribed to Extraordinary Stories HQ for more powerful stories that will move you every week. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload, and leave a comment telling us what you thought about Nathaniel and Alexander's journey.